Hello. So I'm going to tell you about the first time I got a protective order to suppress my speech. So it was around 2005 in Montana, and I'm a fifth generation Montanan. I grew up in Eureka, Montana, knew everybody, right? I was just hometown gal. I have my own real estate company, and I stood up for this one landowner that had been run over by, a big corporation, cut trees off on their land, and it's like cut them down and then ask later, just really bullying them. So I posted a little bit on that on my real estate stuff because I had a large network presence on the internet through real estate. And then there started being a whole slew of local date rape druggings. Now, they weren't all about rape. They were doing it to men and women and just to watch them. People were getting in car accidents. Women would lose memories the whole night. They'd lose their purse. They'd wake up in gravel pits. And through that, there ended up being in Lincoln County, Montana, over that year and a half, around 40 rapes. They upped the staff in Libby, Montana at the county hospital for rape kits. Now, the county seat was an hour and a half away, so anytime there was elections or when someone was taken to jail, they were driven an hour and a half. A lot of things, dirty things, happened in that hour and a half. There's Libby Dam. There's also about 15 miles outside Eureka is called the Green Bridge. The cops that would take the voting, for example, they would throw the votes over the bridge. Lots of unthinkable things could happen between Eureka and the county seat if you were in a cop car or you were a voting ballot. So, back up a little bit to when I was 18, maybe 16, 18. I babysat for some friends of the family, and I babysat this baby. And she was just a beautiful, beautiful baby. And so, then let's go back. When she was 19, she was one of these rape victims. And broke my heart, and I stood up for her. Now, the county commissioners weren't listening to her. The police weren't listening to her. It was stunning to me, right? There was evidence. She'd went over to cut the guy's hairs. All she was drinking was water. Now, at the time, this date rape drug, they could transfer it on stickers on your arm. It was weird. Put it in water. It can be clear. It could be anything. Anyway, she woke up the next morning in her car in different clothes. There was vomit all over the car, and she had been raped. And she did the rape kit. She did everything proper. Nothing was done, and no one believed her. So, I started reporting on it. I'm not going to go into the details of everything, but long story short, the rapists, the people doing the drug running, they were drugging and raping women and selling. Once the woman was knocked out, they were selling her body to other men. The rapists were running drugs for the cops and the Border Patrol. I lived on a border town, the Roosevelt border there in northwest Montana. Across the border many times my whole life, up into Canada. School events, any kind of function, go up to Fernie for the Olympic stuff. Just, it was part of everyday life because the border was so close. So, and these rapists were doing really sick things. They had hung a dog over a bridge, and I was reporting on that, and all these things that the police were ignoring, the sheriffs were ignoring, the Border Patrol were ignoring. And come to find out, these rapists were running drugs for the border. There was a whole bunch of money involved, and the sheriff and the deputies and the local police and the Border Patrol agents were involved in running drugs across the border. Now, the Yak in Montana is famous for drug running and violence. There's a lot of suicides in the Yak, bullet to the back of the head and no gun. And I didn't know any of this stuff. It wasn't that I was naive. I just didn't know about this stuff. And so I got in deep fast. I didn't know. That's why I thought I was just sticking up for some gal and reporting on some local rapes. But it was connected to as high as it gets in corruption. Homeland Security, all of it involved. Big money, big bonuses, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars found on drug runners over the yak, and they just take the money and then they kill the drug dealer. I had no idea. I didn't know this stuff even existed. At this time in 2004, I was 34, I think. You think? Yeah. Let's see, 1970, yeah, okay. We decided to run a recall for the sheriff because they weren't investigating the rapes. Well, this local man joined the recall. He was very supportive, shocking, wasn't political then at all. He belonged to a political party, but the Democratic Party was the ones that were doing the drug running and the drug raping and all that, and the conservatives stuck up for me. I was out lesbian. I'd been out since I was 15, so I'd already been out 20 years. But they stood up with me. Well, one of the men had been involved in the Montana Freeman incident. I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about it. Well, he joined the recall, just helping us out. Well, I didn't know that there was 30 years of FBI and CIA and government corruption that was part of something called the Montana Freeman incident. Had no idea. So that brought all eyes on me. Okay, so I'm telling you about my first protective order to silence my speech. Okay? It's going to be a little side story here. So I lived on a road called Grave Creek Road, the Tin Lakes Scenic Area in Montana. I named my real estate company Tin Lakes Realty. Just a beautiful wilderness area. My neighbor was a guy, let's just say a guy. This is this dirty old man. He used to come over all the time, blah, blah, blah. I thought he was lonely, right? We just, he'd always flirt with me and my partner. I lived with a gal there, a woman lived with her for 7 years. We were in a relationship. And he'd come over all the time, and we'd kind of just patronize him. We'd help him out, just kind of whatever. Okay, so when all this Freeman stuff come down, the guy's son, turns out he was married to the Freeman incident guy's daughter. And so they had all kinds of history. So, my mission kind of at the time was to report on people that were dissing the recall. So this guy did a letter to the editor, and he was saying a whole bunch of things false about the recall for sheriff. And so I corrected it, and then I called him a couple of names. I don't know, they're benign now, really. But he turned his ire towards me. And in the background, which I found out over the next decade, Homeland Security, government agents had contacted him and used him to get at me and his father-in-law, which I had nothing to do with. This man wasn't in my life. He was just part of the recall. So this man worked at the University of Montana. This is how I learned all this stuff. And University of Montana's head then was high up in Homeland Security. Homeland Security used the universities at the time. They've changed it since because I kept calling them out. When I see the FBI on my stat counter, I see Homeland Security. They use the universities all across the United States and interconnected networking through the internet to attack people like me who were exposing corruption, especially that they were involved in. And so this man he attacked me online. He threatened to kill me. I went to a local judge to get a protective order, and she said, "Oh yeah, definitely," and she definitely knew it was him. And I'd proved it with all of the, the internet tracking numbers and all that. So she went to her office to get some paperwork and come back and said, well, she couldn't give me one, right? Well, it turned out, years later, I found out she'd made a call, and higher-ups in the county government told her that she could not give a protective order. So she gave the excuse, well, he wasn't my boyfriend, he wasn't part of my family, so no protection order. And they knew that he wanted to kill me. It was nothing to do with me. Okay, so I decided that I was going to go to Hamilton, Montana, if you've seen the documentary Beneath the Beauty, and try to get a protective order there because that's where the guy lived. And he worked at the University of Montana. And so I went there, and I wasn't allowed one. Okay, well, a couple weeks later, a judge in Hamilton, Montana, gave him a protective order against me. Okay, so I'm all right. Okay, cool. I got all the evidence, right? Judges are going to be cool. I got all this evidence. So I go and show all the evidence. The judge didn't look at any of it. She'd already predetermined This was about in 2004. She'd already predetermined she was going to give him the protective order. She was trying to make me give my social security number. She goes, "What's your social security number?" Asked me all these questions. She wouldn't let me give my side of the story or any of my evidence. She just asked me those. I said, "Well, can I walk up there and give it to you?" Because I didn't want to give it in open court. And so I knew in that moment, odds are I wasn't going to live through the next little bit. It was a stunner. So let me back up a little bit. So when I started reporting and I started getting heat, this man, very conservative, he contacted me. We communicated for quite a while, and he'd written some books on corruption and stuff, and he said that he had a family member that was high up in the FBI, and he said, "All right, well, in your situation, you know, I accidentally stumbled into all this. So now I got to live through it, right?" Okay, so it's 2004, and so he says, here's what they're going to do. They're going to tap your phones, which Homeland Security did right after that. You'd call my house sometimes to get Homeland Security. I was put on a terrorist watch list. When I crossed the border, I was held for 6 hours at a time, where I'd never been held. When I'd fly on the airport, they'd take me aside separate. Never been in trouble. Always a good girl, straight A's, never drank, never nothing. And a terrorist watch list, right? He said they'll plant drugs in your car. They'll get you on noise patrol. They'll get you on all the things that they would do to get me on any crime. Then they'll transport me to Libby, and then I'll disappear in that hour and a half drive. And so he said, so don't go away. Don't go quiet. No matter what they do, don't stop talking. Don't stop blogging. Don't stop telling your story. Don't start being loud, or you won't live through this. So in that moment, I became a movie, and all because of just standing up for a couple local things. So, as soon as I got that protective order, I knew what would be next, that I would get criminal charges on some silly little thing, and I would be dead. And I had already reported on a lot of people, like I said, that had been killed between Eureka and Libby, people in the act to disappear. If they don't get you during the year, they get you in October, hunting season. Pretend you're a bear. Happens all the time. Oh, I didn't know. Anyway, so when I left the courtroom, I went home and packed, and I left Montana for about 2 months to let things settle down. And that kind of began the journey. Now, a lot of things happen later with bigger corporations and other things. But that was the first protective order that I got. And what it was is I couldn't mention his name online. I couldn't have anything online that said his name. Just a whole bunch of things about speech, which now I know is illegal. It's called unconstitutional prior restraint. You can't use a protective order to suppress speech. It's a violation of the First Amendment. There's tons of case law on it. Here in Port Townsend, Washington, I've had probably about 10 protective orders against me to do the same thing, and the constitutional law doesn't matter. Judge Mindy Walker keeps saying, well, it's not constitutionally protected speech. Well, it is. It's prior speech. Even if they court order you to remove something that they claim is defamatory, which you don't get to litigate and prove whether it is, they can't, under constitutional law, they can't suppress future speech. It's unconstitutional prior restraint. But in Port Townsend, they give me protective orders all the time and do that. And I can't afford to appeal it to the state level because you need an attorney. And it's not like the other lawsuits because you can't get it on contingency. You have to have the money to pay for it. There's no money in it for any attorney. Attorney's not going to take it. And it's not criminal, it's civil. So they get it in civil court here in Port Townsend. The very next day, they start calling 911, they start going to the police, and they start racking up criminal charges. I have over 20 now here in Port Townsend, Jefferson County, Washington. Never had any criminal charges in my entire life, and now I do here for speech. I got criminal charges for filing for public records. The police sent it to the prosecutor because I'd ordered public records. I went to the pharmacy to get a prescription and ran into somebody that had a protective order, and I left right away. They got criminal charges against me. I was doing laundry one day and didn't see the people in the store and just sitting there at Starbucks, and they got criminal charges against me. I said the word Salish Rescue, criminal charges. I said the word Northwest Maritime Center, I got criminal charges. One of the Salish rescue men got a protective order against me, put his email as a service address for legal documents, and he said in court could serve him to that. I served him via email. He filed criminal complaints. And you might think, oh, well, they can say whatever they want with criminal complaints. Yeah, but the police filed the charges and sent him to the prosecutor. Sergeant Greenspan in Port Townsend called me to interrogate me because I'd sent, as a pro se litigant, legal documents to a legal service address that was on the documents that I was allowed to do. And Greenspan's been there for decades. They did it for retaliation. They did it for harassment. Criminal charges, they accused me of forging a boat title because I'd shown that somebody did, okay? And several. I got over 20 criminal charges here in Port Townsend. So let's back up to the other one. So that man that got the protective order against me, harassed me, threatened to kill me constantly. He had hundreds of blogs about me. He terrorized me, right? I'd been good to his father. I was a local. And he was paid to do so, I found out years later, through Homeland Security's program, through the universities that went after folks like me who were exposing corruption, exposing what they were doing. And so that's my experience with my first protective order. It was about 20 years ago. And in order to live through it, I had to get loud and bold. In order to have First Amendment protection and stay alive, you got to get loud. And so my memes, my funny things, all my stuff out there is me just staying visible. And here in Port Townsend, I've seen enough public records now to know, to feel in my heart, that had the Port Townsend leader not reported on the Faber ethics complaint, they would have killed me or jailed me. I'd already racked up over a dozen criminal charges by then. I didn't even know. They do it in secret. The police don't let you know. They send it to the prosecutor. Greenspan called me a couple of times. I got called and interrogated, but most of the time you don't even know. And meanwhile, so they're racking it up. And so they kept dragging me into court. I got PTSD. I kept having panic attacks. They'd get protective order for protective order. Libby Winstrom would harass me and intimidate me. A public record shows she was talking to people about the good Reverend needs to take a walk on the waterfront, so they wanted me dead. They kept me under constant surveillance. They sent people to my house with envelopes with wax and some sort of fluids on them. They follow me to the store, then they get a criminal charge saying that I'm there, right? All for speech. I never talked to any of these people in person, never met them in real life. All this for speech that they didn't like. And your judges and your deputies and your cops and your city officials and your county commissioners, all of them support it, stand by it, and condone it. And there's nothing you can do. And the only thing that a gal like me can do is to keep talking about it, which I did. And I had been under it for years. And when I did the Faber complaint, it was, I wasn't really ready to do that. I was going to do complaints about him with the Jamon thing. The golf course thing was a vision. Spirit showed me something, and the land called me. I believe in fairy and fae and folklore, and I believe that the golf course land is magical. And what Spirit showed me is what I was standing up for. And so in doing that, and in discovering Faber's connections to Theo Howard and all of that, and I had legitimate evidence, and I had legitimate standing, and the PT leader could see that I'd backed it up with evidence, and they reported on it. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. I could breathe. Because they put my name in lights. And the year before, when they broke Jenny Ellison emotionally, she couldn't take it. She was hospitalized. And I wasn't talking to her. I couldn't, because I didn't want to get any more criminal charges and go to jail. They did the same thing to Eric Winstrom, and he went to jail for 6 months. And I didn't want to, and I was scared, and I was under so much stress, and throwing up every day, and I couldn't eat, and I was having mental breakdowns and panic attacks every day. So I told Jenny I couldn't talk to her. I couldn't be her victim's advocate because Judge Remsen had ruled that she wasn't a vulnerable adult, which she is, and gave the men protective orders against her and me to silence me because of the Touchstone incident and everything Jenny was reporting as a Salish rescue whistleblower against a government official. They broke her. And when the PT leader reported on the Faber complaint, she came back. She came back mentally. People contacted her. She found breathing room. Salish Rescue and all the demons backed off. And also just after that, the Julie Jamon lawsuit was filed. So they knew that I had eyes on me that was bigger and that they couldn't make me disappear. And that what they did was going to be seen nationally. And they backed off a little bit. Enough for us to survive. Now, since then, I've got a lot more criminal charges and a lot more protective orders. But I know now that I'll live through it. And I know that Jenny will live through it because the PT leader reported on it. Now, here in Port Townsend, they use protective orders as weapons all the time. This one story, this man told me that Faber, Sam Feinstein, the Faber Feinstein law firm, advised him. So basically, he was quite a bit older than his baby mama, way older. And he set her up to look like she was abusing him. Then he was going to get a protective order and get her in jail and keep the kid. And this was, according to him, allegedly, Sam Feinstein of Feinstein and Faber had advised him of this. I know another gal, a lot of them have these same attorneys, the bad guys, like Alton McFadden, where Judge Remsen will give the abuser the protective order against his victim over and over and over. In the Eric Winstrom case, same MO. All of Salish Rescue, one day they called 911 over 12 times. They created a record over and over. The police would go to Eric's house without a search warrant and look in the windows and try to look for guns. They followed him around town to see if he's having a drink, to see if he missteps. They drove him insane, and he lost it. And they kept the pressure on until Libby Winstrom got her way in the divorce. I didn't want that to happen to me, so I backed off. After the Salish Rescue Protective Order, I removed 500 videos online that I wasn't court ordered to do about city officials. Because I was scared. To death, literally. Cops, everybody on me. And I thought that if I did that, they'd back off. They didn't. And I wished I hadn't removed them. And they kept coming. They kept calling 911. They kept getting the police after me. They kept dragging me into court. I do a video about some other local thing. They drag me into court to try to take away my guns. They drag me into court to try to get me in jail. And it's civil, right? So you can't get an attorney. Once it goes to the prosecutor and you get criminal charges, then it's criminal. But meanwhile, they can and you can get an attorney. But meanwhile, they put you under constant arrest. Now, they do this in divorce situations, in custody situations, when they're trying to shut up someone like me. They do it if it's their, client of a favored law firm like Faber and Feinstein or this Alton McFadden. And the activist judges, Judge Mindy Walker, Judge Lorraine Remsen, help. Okay? And it doesn't matter how much evidence you bring into court. They pick the abuser over the victim. When I first got to Port Townsend in 2012, I went to court and stood up for some folks. And this young gal was being molested by her brothers, and they were her stepbrothers. And there was a couple of them, and their dad had died, and they had a trust fund. And the mom was being abused by the stepdad, but he was a fireman, so, called Code Blue or whatever. So the judge, Keith Harper, and then the attorney, I forget her name, notorious around here, made it so that he got custody of the kids, as they were splitting up. Weren't his blood kids, but they had a big trust fund. And they were being molested in the home by the older brother. And I couldn't help them. I did all I could to advise them. So the mom, as in many cases like this, went back to the dad so she could stay with their daughters. And suffered a lot of abuse until they turned 18 and she could be free. And so that's what happens here in Port Townsend. And that's my story, my first protective order. I had another one that lasted over a decade, and that for another story. All to silence my speech and to bully me and mentally torment me and gang stalk me and try to get me to submit. And I survived it all, and I did it alone. I never ever really had support. Over the last decade, I've had a really good friend, one friend. Conservatives, liberals, people on all sides run. The victims run. The abusers run because they can't take the heat. I've had people go to jail. The Lawless America guy did all these documentaries, tons of corruption stories. They jailed him in Missoula, Montana, and the cops there said they'd let him out of jail if I would take my blogs down. You know, this guy was no connection to me. And I said, no, no way. If you've seen my Obsidian story, they put my source in a mental institute and nearly drugged her to death. The only way they'd let her out is if she signed a document that she'd never speak to me. So I've been around with this. In Port Townsend, I've never, ever had so many protective orders against me as I do here, right? You can't do a meme, you can't make a joke, you can't make a parody, you can't be offensive, you know, fighting words, right? They can literally kick your ass in the streets. They can trash you online. They can trash you everywhere. They can threaten to kill you, all that. But if I make a joke meme, then Judge Mindy Walker says that's not protected, it's offensive, it's fighting words, it's defamation, it's not true. She doesn't let me prove it, right? So Sailors Rescue members have it. The commander of the VFW has protective orders against me. Various local people supporting the hive mind have protective orders against me. And the police take it serious. And, you know, this Crystal person, even though I've never had a criminal record, never done drugs, never alcohol, never had a speeding ticket here, never been pulled over, never had a criminal charge, you know, I'm always the bad guy because I'm exposing what they're doing. So anyway, there's a little bit of overview about protective orders and the origin story for me. I love you all. Bye for now.